Hey y'all, welcome back. It's MJ here, just plain fun. This video is on the top 10 things to do or not do with hand planes. Y'all ready? If you've been following this channel for very long, you know that I have a hate-hate relationship with vinegar, as do many other folks who are into this hobby. So I thought, what better way to demonstrate than to show y'all in a video. I've got this busted up hand plane right here. Hopefully nobody's going to argue that this could be saved. It's got some rust on it. It's got the usual stuff. And I'm going to show y'all what happens when we put a hand plane in vinegar. If you opt to use Evaporust to clean up hand planes or hand plane parts or both, just make sure that you submerge the item completely. I'm intentionally not submerging this because I want to show you what happens when you don't. And now what we're going to do is we're going to set this aside. Most folks are going to soak something in vinegar for a few hours or a day or overnight or whatever the case. I'm going to set this aside, and then toward the end of the video, I'm going to go ahead and take it out, and we're going to wipe it down, and we're going to see how she looks. Number 9, things to not do with hand planes. Do not buy a hand plane with a stamped steel frog. This is what it looks like right here. If you see this, it is not cast like a good frog would be. It's stamped, and it's stamped steel, and it is not good. Do not spend money on, i.e. a Pexto or any hand plane. And while we're at it, don't buy one with plastic handles if it looks anything like this. If it's got this cheap, chintzy material like this, unless you're just into Corsair. But don't buy this garbage, because all it's going to do is just frustrate you and leave you not even wanting to use hand planes. I don't want to tell you what not to buy without following that up with what to buy. If you've watched my video on the beginner's guide to buying your first hand plane, you probably already know this. If you haven't, I'm going to highly encourage you to go back and queue that one up so you can watch it immediately after this. But let's suppose that buying a hand plane is on a spectrum. On the far left, you got this piece of junk right here, this stamped steel that I just highly advised, stamped steel frog, I highly advised not to buy. And then you got this one with a plastic handle. So these are complete junk, and they're not worth your money. Same thing with that Windsor or whatever it is from Harbor Freight. Do not buy those. I implore you. And then this is going to be a hot take, and people are going to disagree with me. But next up, your Miller's Falls. This represents the Miller's Falls, the Sergeants, the pre-Stanley Unions, planes of that caliber. They're fine. They're going to make great users. And if you want to have something different, then that is a fantastic option to go with. And getting into what I consider the upper echelon of hand planes, of course, the Stanley Bailey. This is going to be a Type 11. This is my number 5. You've seen it before, probably, if you've been following the channel long. And then the next higher evolution in the species is going to be your Bedrock. That's Stanley's premium line from back in the day. And then it's pretty hard to top a nice Lee Nielsen. Modern, contemporary, very, very well built, and a little dirty apparently. It's pretty hard to top a Lee Nielsen. And I only bring that up because the takeaway here is buy the best plane that you can afford, especially when you're first starting out. Get the best plane that you can afford, either a number 4 or a number 5. You're doing your thing, you're taking some shavings, cleaning up the edge of a board. What you don't want to do is you don't want to set your plane down on the sole, because if it gets knocked or bumped, you're running the risk of damaging your iron, getting a little nick in there, etc., etc. So never set your plane down directly on the sole. And your number 7 tip of what not to do around hand planes. You just switch planes, you're going to the smoother for whatever reason, and you want to switch planes or you want to do something else. You never set your hand plane down on the cheek like so, because if you do, you're exposing the iron, and now if you were to run your hand across that, you could risk cutting yourself, or you could knock something into that. So what you never want to do is don't set your hand plane on the cheek. And here's another good one. Never use your hand plane as a hammer. That one's for old Eli Arnold. Right, Eli? Never use a hand plane as a hammer. It might be effective, but it's not a good idea. Let's clamp it solely by the cheeks. So if you're going to clamp it upside down for whatever reason in your vise, make sure that you put it down low enough so that the sole, the base of the sole, is supported. If it's not supported and you get to cranking on this thing, and this is pop goes the weasel. Here's another one that just came from the pile, and I highly suspect that that's how that crack got there as well. So the takeaway, don't clamp it by the cheeks. If you're going to clamp it, make sure you put it far enough down so that the sole is protected. Next on our list of things to not do with hand planes, and I'm going to go ahead and say never on this one. Never tighten the bejeebies out of your frog screws. These just need to be good and tight. They don't need to be smoked on there. You don't have to, be He-Man. They just need to be good and tight. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't even use a screwdriver like this that would give me a little bit more leverage. Just a regular screwdriver, get them snug. The washer's going to help. It's going to hold your frog in place. Don't overdo it. Because if you do, it is going to open up your mouth just like a can. Think of it as, peeling back the top of an aluminum can. Right there, you've seen this probably if you've been around hand planes for very long, or if you haven't, you will. These little cracks that show up on the corner are from over tightening of the hardware up top. So you just definitely want to stay away from that. This next one might seem kind of obvious to y'all, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway because I saw it almost happen recently. Do not set your nice, finely tuned, and expensive tool on the edge of your bench where you're just kind of straddling because you're like, hey, I'm going to pick it right back up, because all it's going to take is just one good bump and it's going down. And incidentally, that's how we end up with things like bent irons like that, because it falls and lands on the iron, or worse yet in some ways, with broken totes, with rosewood that's over 100 years old and now is busted. And then here we come along years later wanting to buy hand planes, and this is the kind of stuff that's on the ones that we find at garage sales. This one also might seem obvious, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, because if I could save one person from cutting themselves, especially somebody who's new, I'm in. I'm all for it. Never clear your shavings from the mouth by running your hand or fingers or anything across that blade. Again, I know it sounds obvious, but figure out some other way to get your shavings out that does not involve you running your hand across your blade. If you must, if you feel you must, you can actually go with the blade like so, but just never go sideways, never come back. And like I said, if I can save one person from getting cut, hey, I'm all for it. This one's near and dear to my heart. Give serious consideration. If you're getting into hand planes, give serious consideration to keeping it as a hobby. Do not try to turn it into a business unless you are just absolutely dead set you want to turn it into a business, because business and hobbies, as most of you probably know, not always a good mix. Lest you end up needing to package packages, make YouTube videos, list things on eBay, coordinate with people who want to buy things. And I'm not complaining, because y'all have given me a great and wonderful opportunity. But just think about it before you get into the business side of things, and consider keeping your hobby a hobby. Full disclosure, this did stay in the vinegar a little longer than I had originally intended due to production delays in the making of the video. But hopefully you take my point that vinegar is not the way to go. That's really the big takeaway that I hope everybody sees. As you can tell, it is effective in removing rust. Nobody is going to question whether it will remove the rust, the grime, etc. from your hand plane. However, it does permanent damage. It makes a permanent change to that cast iron, and it will never go back to its original state. And that is the main reason why vinegar is just a terrible idea. And you'll probably remember I said that we were going to leave it partially submerged so that you could see, and you can see where the line is. And incidentally, Evaporust will do the same thing. If you don't completely submerge your item in Evaporust or vinegar or whatever you're using, it will leave that line, and that line will be almost impossible to get rid of. Let me go ahead and show y'all. This is actually one of my working planes, just because I'm either a glutton for punishment or I have a big heart or something. But this plane, before it came to me, was used and abused, and I just couldn't bear to let it go, and so I went out of my way to save it. But as you can see, it's got that same mark. It's got the same where it was partially submerged. It's got the permanent etching from whatever it was used, or whatever is used to soak it, probably vinegar, and that'll never go away. Now, this is my dedicated scrub plane, and it works its tail off here in my shop. And as you can see, I put a couple of other questionable, maybe not questionable, but a couple of other less than perfect parts on there, just to prove a point that you really don't have to ever really give up on a plane, because usually you can find a purpose for it. Sometimes that purpose is to star in a video. And if you're wondering, if you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not supposed to use vinegar, Evaporust is questionable, what am I supposed to use? WD-40 is an option. Simple Green is an option. I believe I talked about this in my, I know I talked about this in my cleaning up hand planes video, so feel free to search through my videos and check that one out. You can also use some good old-fashioned wax, but the generally accepted way to remove rust is just to use a razor blade like so, and you can scrape it. And if you put a little bit of wax or a little bit of WD-40 or a little bit of Simple Green, basically anything that you can use as a lubricant to help prevent that razor blade from scratching where you don't want it to scratch, and also to help loosen up whatever material you're trying to get rid of, the grime, whatever. Different folks, or different strokes, different folks. Some folks swear by the wax, some folks swear by the WD-40, and it's really all about a matter of personal preference, just like I talked about in the cleaning up hand planes video. And as a matter of fact, some folks even use sandpaper. But you can see there the line. There was really no reason to soak this in vinegar, because I can get this look right here and then follow that up with some type of abrasive, some type of, whether it's sandpaper or again the razor blade, etc., and I can retain that patina without ruining the hand plane, without ruining the original surface. And that is, once again, things to not do with your hand plane. Hashtag never vinegar. Last and most certainly not least, choose your toolkit wisely. I can assure you this is not a paid promotion for Lost Art Press, but I am going to go ahead and plug them. The Anarchist Tool Chest, I highly recommend this book. I've recommended it in at least one or two other videos. Pick it up. It will help you distill the tools that you need down to the necessities, so that you can focus on what you need in order to do whatever tasks or whatever things you want to do in woodworking. Because the opposite of that is you just buy everything that you see, whether you need it or not, and maybe you don't even take the time to tune it up and learn how to use it. You just keep buying and keep amassing and keep collecting, and there's nothing wrong with collecting, but choose your toolkit wisely. So for example, this is a little spoke shave for doing luthier work. Am I ever going to build a musical instrument? I don't know, maybe when I'm 90, but not anytime soon. Do I need that spoke shave? Absolutely not. Do I own about 5 of them? You're darn skippy, I do. And I reckon that makes me a hypocrite. But if you remember nothing else, remember, choose your toolkit wisely. And there you have it, folks. That's your 10 things to do or not do with hand planes. Y'all come on into the comments and let me know, what would you add to the list? How many of those have you broken?